どうも、勝手に電力2.0でも始めたいと思います。今日1151回目というところで、このインドネシアの太陽光というところですね。新規タンクであるこの Iesr さんの見立てというところを少しご紹介したいなと思ってます。で実際チャット GPT のですね、ちょっとまとめてもらいました。脱炭素化へのコミットメントと、インドネシア政府が2060年までに、あるいはそれ以前にネット排出量をゼロを目指していますと、太陽エネルギー、特に太陽光発電 PV がこの移行において重要です。2021年末時点で太陽光の設置容量はわずか0.2ギガワットなんですね。で深刻な脱炭素化に必要な水準を大きく下回っていると。なので、太陽光は実はポテンシャルあるんだけど、全然導入量が少ない。太陽エネルギー部門の進展、太陽エネルギー部門では特に大規模太陽光発電の PPA 価格が大幅に低下し、進展が見られますと。で、2022年第3期、四半期時点で、ちらた、まさにこれ今回できたところですけど、145メガワットのフローティング PV プロジェクトを含む合計550メガ、5メガの太陽光発電プロジェクトが進行中と。で、課題的機会でインドネシアは太陽エネルギーの利用において信頼が低いという認識やコストの問題に直面している。しかし、100万ソーラールーフトップイニシアティブやネットメタリングのような最近の開発が屋上太陽光の導入を加速させていると。で、政府の進展ですね。大統領令112、2022年は、再生可能エネルギーの新しい電力購入政策や石炭発電所の早期閉鎖を加速する指示を組むことでセクターに活気を与えることが期待されています。将来の展望、インドネシアの太陽エネルギー展望は、脱炭素目標を達成するために太陽光発電の大規模導入が必要であることを強調と。電力部門の脱炭素化には2060年の少なくとも420ギガワット相当な量ですね。日本でもまだまだ全然ここに行かないので、太陽光の導入が必要ですと。製造サプライチェーン。中国が太陽光発電製造の価値連鎖を支配しており、サプライチェーンの脆弱性が存在します。インドネシアの国内太陽光発電製造能力は現在限られており、包括的な産業政策の必要性も強調と。経済的、環境的考慮事項で、この目標は太陽エネルギーの経済的持続可能性と環境への影響を分析していますと、新しい太陽光発電とエネルギー調達が石炭にも競争力を持つようになり、太陽エネルギーがインドネシアのエネルギー移行における重要な素材のことが示唆されているということで、まさに Solar Energy will play an essential role in the decarbonization of the global energy system and the mitigation of climate change. The 2022 IPCC report on the mitigation of climate change has found that all modeled mitigation pathways that limit warming to 1.5 degree with no limited overshoots involve rapid and deep emission reduction in all sectors. This is especially so for the energy sector. In all modeled pathways that reach global net zero GHG emissions, almost 75% of the emission reduction are achieved by CO2 emission reduction in the energy sector, whereas the remaining are achieved by CO2 emission reduction in the AFOLU sector, 13%, and non-CO2 emission reduction from all sectors, 30%, signifying the importance of a deep decarbonization of the global energy system. The IPCC also notes that in scenario limiting warming to 1.5 degree, low and zero carbon technologies are projected to cover 97 to 99% of global electricity in 2050. 63 to 85% of primary energy in 2050. Solar, particularly photovoltaics and wind energy, are projected to be the primary contributors, 40 to 80% to the global electricity production in 2050, with 70% being the median for the no overshoot scenario. This signifies the importance of both solar and wind in the mitigation of climate change and the decarbonization of the energy system. Share of low carbon energy in global electricity generation is assessed pathway and scenarios in AR6 WG3 report 2022-2050. The emergence of solar's role in the mitigation of climate change has been largely enabled by the falling unit cost of PV modules over the past decade. The global cost per unit of energy of several key low emissions technologies such as solar energy, wind energy, and batteries have fallen significantly over the last decade, making the low emission energy transition through 2030 economically attractive. From 2010 to 2019, there have been sustained reductions in the unit cost of solar PV 85%, wind energy 55%, and lithium-ion battery 85%. The cost of alternative solar technologies like concentrating solar power CSP have also declined by half over the period same period, also its deployment and significance remain lower than PV in scenarios that limit warming to 1.5 degrees. A mix of policy instrument and strong government support, especially in the US and Japan in 1970 to 1990s, Germany in the 20s, and later China 20 to 2010s, have enabled these cost reductions and supported global adoption. Also, adoption in emerging economies have generally lagged due to weaker enabling conditions. By the end of 2021, global installed solar capacity has reached 940 gigawatt and has last reached 1 terawatt mark in May 2022 from only 40 gigawatt in 2010. China 308 gigawatt cumulative installed capacity in 2021, US 123 gigawatt, Japan 78 gigawatt, India 60 gigawatt, and Germany 59 gigawatt remain the top 5 largest markets for solar in 2021. Unit cost reduction and global adoption in the key low emission technology 20 to 2020. Despite accelerated and significant growth over the past decade, the current pace still falls short of what is required to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. Accelerated growth of global solar deployment over the past decade has made significant progress in the terms of electricity generation. In 2010, solar accounted for only 0.1% of global electricity generation. By the end of 2021, this has increased to 3.4%, 10% when combined with the IEA, renewables in total accounts for 29.5% of global electricity generation in 2021. Despite the significant growth, global electricity generation from solar still falls short of what is required to limit warming to 1.5 degrees according to IEA's net zero by 2050 scenario, which is consistent with the 50% chance of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees with no or limited overshoot. Solar should represent 19% of global electricity generation by 2030, 40 VRE, and 33% by 2050, 68% VRE. Renewable energy in total should make up 61% of electricity generation by 2030 and 88% by 2050. IRENA similarly projected that VRE generation must account for 42% by 2030 and 63% by 2050. In terms of capacity, both IEN and IRENA expected around 5,000 gigawatts of installed PV by 2030 and 14,500 gigawatts by 2050 to align with the 1.5 degree target. Solar is also set to play a vital role in Indonesia. Deep is also a vital role in Indonesia Iesr's deep decarbonization study 2021. Solar is expected to contribute 88% of the electricity generation in 2050, with about 1,500 gigawatts of mostly utility scale solar installation, 80%, coupled with energy storage system, inter-island connections, including power to air, policy deployed zero by 20. And take up at least with about 4 capacity should reach 55 gigawatt out of 140 gigawatt of renewable installed capacity, where renewables should represent one-third of electricity generation in 2030. By 2040, nearly 90% of electricity supplies comes from renewables and unabated coal is phased out. solar and wind together provide about 55% of electricity generation and maintain similar share of 2040 to 2060. While there have been many studies and models that show the important role of solar in Indonesia, Indonesia's current solar deployment has only reached 0.2 gigawatt Q3 2022, with solar share in electricity generation of only less than 1%. Understanding the importance of solar in Indonesia's deep decarbonization, Indonesia Solar Energy Outlook ISO 2023 aims to track and analyze policy and market developments of solar in Indonesia with the aim to inform the policymakers and other relevant stakeholders in both the public and private sectors to accelerate solar deployment in Indonesia. Solar capacity and generation mix in Indonesia's energy sector pathway. Installed capacity very 80%. In this report, utility-scale solar is defined as a ground-mounted or floating solar project with a minimum capacity of 1 megawatt that sells and transit electricity to an electricity utility through a power purchase agreement (PPA). Colloquially, this is known as independent power produce IPP solar. In Indonesia context, this does not only refer to IPP projects that sell electricity to PLN, state electricity utility, but also to other wilayah usaha license holders that is provide power utility PPU, large-scale non-rooftop solar project owned by PLN directly without PPA is also included in this category. While the term utility scale in its literal sense may refer to the project size, it is also often distinguished and is useful too by the way it is set in the traditional power generation sense, that is centralized power generation that feeds electricity into the grid to be transmitted and distributed to the end users through the power grid. In contrast, distributed solar refers to solar projects that generate power at the or near the end user's location on site rather than having be transmitted like traditional power generation. This includes both small-scale systems, such as rooftop solar, and large-scale systems, such as large commercial and industrial rooftop solar, ground-mounted and floating solar. A specific term, captive power, is also often used to describe distributed power generation used explicitly or mainly for self-consumption. Further, captive power is often distinguished by power generation that supply end users directly rather than to electric utility. Utility-scale solar remains the largest contributor to Indonesia's total installed solar capacity, also nowhere near deep decarbonization requirements. By Q3 2022, there were 76 megawatts of installed utility-scale solar projects representing about 40% of Indonesia's total installed solar capacity. In terms of electricity generation, however, utility-scale solar accounts for only 0.04% of total grid-tied electricity generation in 2021, excluding off-grid generation. And this falls short of the deep decarbonization scenario that requires 24% of electricity generation share from solar by 2030, of which 80% are expected to be generated from utility-scale solar, while still eventually far from decarbonization requirements, utility-scale solar has shown a rather promising deployment in recent years. Solar PPA prices have declined by 78% between 2015 and 2022 from 0.25 per kilowatt hour to 0.056 kilowatt hour, owing to the new PPA of Bali 2 by 25 megawatt project signed in March 2022. In 2020, Indonesia Power, QGS, equally partner solar options had also revealed record low bids to below 0.04, an 84% decline compared to 2050's PPA price. In terms of project pipeline, there are currently 8 projects that have been at least tendered in some way. Total 185 megawatt in capacity. These include Chirata, 145 megawatt FPV project, Banka 10 megawatt, and Bali 2 by 25 megawatt ground-mounted solar project, and project from Indonesia Power's Hijaunesia equity partner auction. Floating solar is expected to lead utility-scale solar development, could also bring co-benefits with paired with hydropower. Floating solar is expected to contribute leading utility-scale solar development and PLN capacity auction addition plan. Also, the project pipeline has not changed much since reported in IETO 2022. As of Q3 2022, there are at least 3 projects totaling 325 megawatt in the pipeline auctioned, and 8 projects total 731 megawatt that are still in pre-development stage, not yet auctioned. In LPTL 2021, PNL plans to add 2.9 gigawatt out of 4.7 gigawatt of solar capacity using IPP scheme, where about 80% of that 2.4 gigawatt is expected to be operational by 2025. With regard to capacity addition plan in LPTL, partnering with PLN subsidiaries, PLN Indonesia Power or PLN Nusantara Power, previous PJB, under 51 to 49 project equity structures seems to be the preferred project deployment style. This is apparent in the case of Chirata, Saguling, and Sinkarak floating solar projects, owing also to their size specifically, and is likely to be followed in other cases such as Kudum, Ombo, Garaja, Munkur, and Stami that already have development agreement from either one of PNN subsidiaries. While the 51 to 49 structure is convenient for both SOEs and the private sector, PLN should also be open to 100% IPP scheme so as not to limit participation and increasing competition in the auction. Retrospectively, solar tenders have been relatively opaque and have been carried out without clear scheduling year prior. To increase transparency and competitiveness of the remaining 2.9 gigawatt to be procured using IPP scheme, PNL must prepare a clear, transparent, multi-year auction scheduled ahead. Floating solar pipeline Q3 22. Box 1, pairing float solar with large hydropower and could bring several co-benefits. Lower PV curtailment while transmission constraint cause curtailment. Conserve water by shifting hydropower generation to other periods of the year to maximize use zero marginal cost generation from PV. Reduce the dependence of other peaker types generation by reducing PV curtailment and more hydropower flexibility. Diesel conversion to solar plus storage program has officially begun, while location clustering improve auction volumes and economics. Developers note challenges. In March 2022, PLN finally issued the RFP for the first phase of the diesel conversion to renewable program. The first phase of the program aimed to convert 212 megawatt out of 499 megawatt diesel plant in 183 locations into solar plus storage project, while the remaining 287 megawatt will be carried out in the second phase in a yard-specific time frame. To improve auction volume and economic, the digitalization program introduced a cluster concept where the diesel generators scattered over 183 locations are grouped into 8 clusters, 14 to 55 megawatt of capacity per cluster. The first to be tendered for Java Madura Cluster 4 and Kalimantan cluster 5, replacing 19 megawatt and 70 megawatt of diesel generator capacity. Effectively, it is important to note that the program in Procure and the IPP scheme consistent with PTL, where each cluster will have its own PPA with the selected by bidder. The RFP originally expected PPA signing of the two clusters by October 2022, but seems to be facing a delay. While the cluster does improve auction volume, the complexity in bidding off-grid projects in scattered locations are challenging, especially given the short bidding time frame. Developers note this is because it takes time to physically survey and estimate and appropriate bid for the scattered location with their site-specific load profile. Off-grid solar plus storage economics, the higher refraction will be the most sustainable least cost option given the diesel price volatility. Apart from the economical aspect, PLN needs to consider the sustainability of the new hybrid system to achieve the program. Goal tender winners should also include the high renewable energy fraction in fulfilling the site-specific load, which will affect the fuel consumption and CO2 emission in the new system. Despite the potential of eliminating also 1 kilogram CO2 per kilowatt hour of electricity produced by diesel generators, the cost of converting a diesel-only system to 100% PV plus BSS is still expensive for a site with a peak load of 720 kilowatt. For example, the optimism system has an LCOE of 36 USD per kilowatt hour. Because of the current high price of BSS, the system might also be insufficient, requiring PV with a capacity of up to 10 times the peak load. Therefore, conversion to the hybrid system can be executable temporary solution to ensure economic sustainability and significant contribution to CO2 reductions. The new hybrid system must be high reflection. In June 2022, the average price of 1 barrel of crude oil was above US 120 and is expected to stay around US 100 per barrel by the end of the year, which translates to the diesel fuel price of US 1. This drives the generation cost of the diesel-based system to be at least 110% more expensive than their plant. On the other hand, the generation cost of the system with higher refraction is already cheaper than the existing system at the high fuel cost scenario, while potentially reducing CO2 emissions by up to 94%, approving being a low refraction system will prolong the reliance on imported oil with risks of increasing operating costs due to sensitivity to price of diesel.